So what we've been doing all semester is learning about and talking about your physiological response to stress, how to begin to change it by tools and practices, and then how to begin to change it by behaviors. And now we're going to shift to how to change it by going back and looking at the external things. And like I said, the very first day of class, most people think that stress management is just about time management, and that's just a small part of it. Because if you don't understand where stress comes from, and you don't understand how your personal characteristics play into it, you don't have a prayer of being able to really take care of it in the long run. And then having said that, once you get a good foundation on that, then you do need to bring awareness back into the things in your external life that are really going to help if you be able to try to organize them a little bit better in a way that helps you function and reduce your stress. So that's kind of where we're going now with the last piece of this class. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about time management. And I think I gave you a couple weeks ago when I was just beginning to introduce this, because this piggybacks on the eulogy exercise of really what you want your life to look like. And when I said in that exercise, if you don't do that first, it's like climbing the ladder and then finding you're on the wrong wall. So now hopefully through all the stuff that we've done, you've got a little more trajectory of what really is important to you. Because I don't care how much you manage your time, if you're managing your time around the wrong thing, it's not going to give you a very fulfilling life. So now we're going back to, okay, so now what does this really look like? Now, when I talk about time management, again, everybody does this as a journal. Let me rephrase that. Everybody does this as a journal. You can also then choose to expand it and have it be your final project. So let me just remind you, you have a choice of one of three things for your final project. One was the M-Wave. And that meant that you went into the lab at least 10 times and you got on the M-Wave machine, which measured your heart rate variability. You used it as a feedback tool to calm yourself, to try to calm the computer. Okay, if you haven't started that yet, it's too late. The other two options are doing a paper. And the paper is, again, it's not a research paper. I don't want anything that looks like a research paper, and I certainly don't want anything that looks like you cut and paste from something that you found on the internet. This is all about your personal experience. It's written the same as the journals. You're just getting way deeper. So the paper is looking back over the semester about what really resonated with you, why it resonated with you, and the most important then piece of it is what you're going to do about it. Because I don't care how like really clicked with you during the semester, if you don't take action on it, nothing's going to happen. Action is the most important stage in behavior change, and until action takes place, nothing happens. Like I've said a million times, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So the paper is, it's kind of loose in the guidelines because it really depends on what you're going to do it on. The paper takes something in the class and goes deeper and expands wider on your personal experience about that thing and how you're going to specifically implement it into your life. So it could be about the emotional tools we talked about. It could be about the gorilla. I think I told you one student once wrote, a paper called "My Girlfriend was the Gorilla," and really documented on little things that he began to change along the way and documented the change in their relationship. I also told you that if you wanted to do a gratitude journal, you could do a gratitude journal. If that is your choice, again, if you don't start it this week, it's going to be too late. Come see me if you want to do that. I can give you a little bit more instructions on that. We're going to go into a health and fitness unit. Some people choose to do the health and fitness unit for their final paper. Excuse me. I'm still kind of getting over my stuff while I was out last Wednesday. So again, what that final paper is taking something that we did, something we talked about, something we learned about in class, and going deeper and wider and how you're going to implement it. And again, I don't really give really specific criteria, except it needs to be 5 pages and it does need to have a plan of implementation, because it's going to be really varied depending on what it is. The last thing is a time management plan. Now, it's a time management plan. Some people say, I'm just going to record what I did. Recording what you did is not a time management plan. It's planning ahead. So if you're doing a time management plan, it is for 3 weeks. It's the last 2 weeks of the semester and up until your last final on finals week. And some people say, well, if we have this final on, you know, I have a final after I have this final. It doesn't matter. It's a plan. You're planning ahead. So you plan up until your last final on finals week. But I have a really specific process that I want you to do, and that's what we're going to do today. Okay, so if you are planning to do the time management project, you need to pay even more attention today. Everybody does it as a journal for 1 week. But if you're doing it as a final, you do it not only for 3 weeks, but you get way more in depth with it. Okay, so does that make sense? So you got 3 options: the M-Wave, the paper, or the time management project. The time management project, again, I want it done a very specific way, and I want it more in depth, and then I'm going to give you some lists to do along with it. So I'll talk about that as we go. But everybody does it as a journal for 1 week.
So what you need to do is print off a copy of the weekly planner that is in the course documents link in Blackboard. And then you also need to get out a piece of paper and something to write with. So you need to have those 2 different things as you go through the rest of the activity. And pause the video until you get that done.
Okay, so what I want you to do is on your piece of paper, I'm going to ask you, what we're going to do is, because what happens, and this is why a lot of people have trouble with time management, and this is honestly one of the things that I think drives me most crazy about my husband, is that people sit down with a blank calendar and they think if they got an empty square, it means they have time. And then they get frustrated that they either are way too overloaded or they never have enough time to do things. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a process called reverse scheduling. And what reverse scheduling does is it asks you to look at your life and asks you to look at the commitments in your life and take a realistic view about those things before you even begin to manage your time. Because a lot of you are going to find out a lot of different things, and it's going to go all the way across the continuum. Some of you are going to find out that you're actually more scheduled than there are weeks in hours in a week. So here's the thing: you don't manage time. You don't manage time. Time is time. You got 24 hours in a day, period. You don't manage time. It's not like, okay, I need 2 more hours here, and I could do without an hour in that other week. It doesn't work that way. You're given what you're given. But what you do is you manage yourself within the time, which I know sounds like just a play on words, but it's not. Because when you look at it that way, it's like, oh, there's a little more personal responsibility on my part here. Because I'm given the time I'm given. How I manage myself within that time given places a little more personal responsibility on me. And I know it's just a play on words, but it's a pretty important play on words. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to do 2 things right now. I'm going to have you write down a lot of things, but at the same time I'm also going to have you sign into Top Hat. What I want you to do is I want you to write, I'm going to get a list, and I want you to write activity, and I want you to write times 5, and then I want you to write total. That kind of externalized on a piece of paper, I thought, no wonder I'm crazy. Something has to change. Others of you are going to find out that you have way more time than you thought you did. You feel like you're always not having time, and you're going to find out when you really look at the hours that you have way more hours than you thought you did. You're just not managing yourself very well in those those times. So that's a whole different lesson. And so the reason why I do this is because we are going to span the spectrum. All of you are going to find something different. So this is really about going through a process, and it's a real specific process, but to find out your own truth in the process. And then once you find out your own truth in the process, then you figure out how to schedule yourself in a way that works for you. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're just going to look at hours that you spend doing different things. And again, there are no right and wrong answers. We just want to kind of have a realistic view of what your life looks like first. So again, there's no right and wrong answers. And there's going to be a lot of areas that I ask you to talk about or think about that may be gray areas. They may be overlapping areas, and that'll make more sense as we go along. So I just want you to also kind of go through this with your best critical thinking. What we're going to do is we're going to figure out hours that you spend on different things, and sometimes those things overlap. Like I'm going to ask you hours that you spend on eating and hours that you spend on socializing. Sometimes your socializing is eating. So you're just going to allot for that time once, but where do you allot for it is up to you. And then we're going to get to the place of, okay, these are, and by the way, if you have a pencil, I would recommend, highly recommend that you use a pencil. You don't have to do it on the first part, but once we start putting it on the calendar, I would highly recommend that you use a pencil, because what's going to happen is I'm going to ask you to schedule the rest of your life first, and then I'm going to ask you to schedule in the important things. And some of you are going to find out that you have to erase some of the things that you put down first to put in the important things, which just the act of doing that kind of cements it in your brain of, oh yeah, I really do kind of need to take this activity that I usually do during this time slot and move it, because I really do need that time to do something else. So just the act of erasing and moving things around is a really important part of this process. So you don't have to start with a pencil, but once we start putting it on your weekly planner, you need to have a pencil. And this is probably going to take today and Wednesday. It's probably going to take today and Wednesday. So the very first thing I want you to do is I just want you to get out or on your piece of paper, what I want you to do, and I had you write this down, so if you already have it, you can just get it out. I want you to write down activity, and then times 5, and again, and total. And I want you to stay with me with this, because I'm going to give you really specific instructions. I'm going to give you really specific instructions, and I don't want you jumping ahead assuming I'm going to do something, because a lot of times I change it up a little bit. So the very first thing I want you to do is I want you to guess, and again, a lot of this is just your best educated guess. I want you to estimate with your best educated estimation or guess about how many hours you sleep on a typical weeknight. Now, before you even start, and before we even start this process, you need to decide, so you guys pay attention, because if you don't get the directions, you're not going to get it down right. You don't get it down right, you're not getting your assignment right. You need to decide what for you are weekdays and weekends. And what I mean by that is sometimes a Sunday night looks more like a weekday night, and sometimes a Friday night looks more like a weekend night. So how you define weekday and how you define weekend is totally up to you, but you need to be consistent. You need to be consistent. So when I ask you how many hours you sleep on a typical weeknight, that Sunday may reflect that more than Friday. I don't care how you do that. I don't care how you define your weekend and weekday, but it needs to be consistent. So what I want you to do is I want you to give me your best guess. Weekday, how much you sleep on a typical weekday. Now this is total. This is total sleep. Because, you know, like when one of my sons was your age, he'd get off at 11 o'clock at night. Social hour would start, but he had an 8 o'clock class, So he'd just get a few hours of sleep, come to class. People used to tell me he sleep through class, but that's not part of the story. But then he'd go home and he'd sleep a couple hours. So his total sleep was kind of in blocks. So I want to know your total sleep for a typical weekday. So what you're going to do is put sleep here, total sleep. This is weekday sleep. And just give me an answer right here. Best average. And I know sometimes it might be a little different depending on if Monday, Wednesday, Friday is different than Tuesday, Thursday. And again, I want you to do this the way this makes most sense for you. It might make sense to do times 2 and times 3. And what I mean by that, so now you have hours of sleep for one day. I want you to multiply it by 5 and give me a total. Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, somebody stop me, because we're going to keep going with this, and if it doesn't make sense now, it's going to really be a mess later on. So if this is not making sense as we're going on, okay, so that should be the total number of hours that you typically sleep with the all weekdays combined. What I want you to do is I want you to give me weekend sleep. Now, this is a totally different direction. What I want you to do, we're not going to multiply it by 2 because sometimes the weekend looks really different. I want you to give me total hours of sleep that you get on the total weekend. We're not going to multiply it by 5. We're just going to go straight across and give me the total for the full weekend. So, if you are a person that stays out all night long, partying or whatever you're doing and getting very little sleep, recognize that, put it in. Or if you're a person that makes up on the weekends for all the sleep that you miss during the weekdays and wake up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then put that in as well. Again, this isn't about right or wrong. I don't judge the hours, but I want you to be realistic about what your life looks like. So I want you to give me the total hours of weekend sleep. Again, stop me if this doesn't make sense because we're going to keep going. So now I want you to give me total hours of weekday grooming. Total. Not just, so morning, noon, and night, grooming, taking a shower, getting ready to go wherever you're going, work or school. How long does it take you? Morning, noon, and night to get ready to go where you're going. Multiply it by 5. So give me a number, multiply it by 5, and give me a total. And again, if they're very different and you work some of the days and you go to school some of the days and the way you groom is really different, then give me an average. This is the point of this is to give me your best guess about what you do for yourself, not to try to make it look good. It's not about trying to make it look good. This is kind of a tool for you to be able to get in to figure out what your week looks like. Okay, now I want you to give me week and grooming. Total, whole weekend. Get ready to go out Saturday night, put that down. If you never get out of your pajamas all weekend, put that down. Again, there's no right and wrong answers. It's not about being right or wrong here. It's about trying to get a really good reflection about what your week looks like. Okay, so now I want weekday eating. Now, again, what eating is not just the moment you're putting it in your mouth. It also means all the time that it takes to get yourself fed. So if you're walking across campus to go to Denny's or walking across campus to go to the Commons, it's the time walking as well. If you're cooking, it's the time cooking. If you're getting in your car and driving to In-N-Out, it's the drive time to In-N-Out. It's all the time that takes to get you fed. Now again, this is where some gray area comes in, because if you cook but you go to the store every night before you cook, then that needs to be added in. If you just get groceries like once a week, then you would add, I have another category called chores later that it might be better. So you just got to decide where time goes best, but then you need to allot for it somewhere. So again, weekday eating, morning, noon, and night. How much time it takes to eat, how much time it takes to get the food prepared, whether again that's walking somewhere or making it yourself. Multiply it by 5, give me a total. Yeah?
Can we put like in increments of minutes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because a lot of these things aren't going to be straight hours. Excuse me. Okay, so total time, weekend eating. And again, if this is something where you do a lot of socializing while you're eating, you're going to put it under socializing or you're going to put it under eating. You're not going to allot for that time twice. Or you might do half and half, whatever it is for you. But so this is total. Again, we're not multiplying this. Weekend eating. How much time does it take you for your weekend eating? Including preparation, including drive time. So now we're going to go into some categories that are going to be kind of weekly accumulation categories, not necessarily weekday, weekend, and some categories may apply, and I want you to make sure that you're getting your time that you typically do. So the next category is going to be work. If you work, how much time per week do you spend working? And this is a total for the week. And again, I know you don't always know, but give me your best average guess. Yeah. Pardon me? No, because we're going to do travel time in a minute. Good question, though. Any other questions? You guys, if you got questions, ask along the way, because, yeah. So, yes. Yeah, we're going to take school in a minute, so I'm purposely not putting school stuff in yet. This is just work. But by the way, it's any work-like thing. So if you have an internship, if you volunteer, work doesn't have to be defined by making money. Okay? So any work-like thing that you do every week. But this does not add school yet, and it does not add drive time. Because actually what we're going to do right now is to give me weekday travel time. And again, I know it's not always the same on like a Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, but your best guess or best average. Now, let me define travel time. Travel time which is really important at Cal Poly, travel time is getting from point A to point B. So in other words, if you're driving to Cal Poly, you got another at least 20 minutes parking your car and walking across campus. So it's from where you're leaving to when you arrive. It's not just drive time. Okay, so weekday travel time. Best average weekday. And again, if Tuesday, Thursday, and by the way, travel time is travel. So this one is probably going to take some counting up because it's not just travel to school. It's if you work, travel to work. It's if you have, a boyfriend or a girlfriend somewhere and you're doing travel time to their house. If you go home this is weekday. But wherever you go, if you have special events that you go to every week, wherever you go during the week, add in that travel time, point A to point B. If you are a parent, especially a parent from a young child, and you are driving that child or those children everywhere, you need to account for that travel time. It's your choice. Again, you can put it under travel time or you can put it under chores or wherever you want to put it, but it does need to be allotted. So if you care for somebody else, whether it's a parent, a sibling, or a child, that time for care needs to be allotted somewhere. Okay, weekend, so this is weekday travel time times 5, give me a total. Weekend travel time, if you go home, wherever home is, every other weekend, just split it up. Give me half. Give me, kind of your best estimate average. So weekend travel time, point A to point B, wherever you're going. If you're going out, if you're going to work. At this point, although we're not putting in school work right now, if you are traveling to something to do school work, if you have a group project and you're traveling to where you meet, then it would be appropriate to put that in now. So travel to wherever you're going, total for the weekend. So now chores. And chores is going to be kind of a loosely defined category, but it's everything that you need to do to keep yourself functioning. So whether it's doing laundry, cleaning your room, getting your car washed, getting your car gassed up, all the chores that you need to do to paying bills that you need to do to keep yourself functioning. But again, at this point, we're still not including study. So it's everything other than, and again, at this point, if you go to the grocery store, if you do cook for yourself and you go to the grocery store once or twice a week, that would be appropriate to put in here. Okay, total for the whole week. Socialization. No reason why I went to black, I just grabbed the wrong pen. Socialization time. All the time you spend socializing, and again, if it's centered around eating, you just make sure you get it in one place. Don't count doubly for the time, but also make sure you get all the time allotted for. So socialization time would also include social media. Uh-oh. Yeah. So this is a really good question, because let me tell you coming up, because there's some things that you could, there's some things that you can put in different categories. So I am going to put in a category for personal time, which might be gym time. I am going to put in a category for like regularly scheduled activities that might be gym time. So again, right now we're kind of getting into some gray areas for categories, but I want you to make sure that you get everything allotted for. But that again, that social media. Now, regularly scheduled activities. So again, regularly scheduled activities. This could include going to the gym. If you're an athlete, you got to put practice somewhere. It might be watching Game of Thrones on Sunday night. Right? I mean, and again, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm being totally truthful. If you have something that you do that is routinely done, and you know you're going to do it, and you want to spend your time doing it, you allot for it. This is not about right and wrong. If you tape something and watch it later, you might not have it be regularly scheduled. You might put it under personal time. But if you're like at my household and it's 6 o'clock on Sunday night, then it's a regularly scheduled activity. Okay. Personal time. The time that you need or take to do the things that aren't already allotted somewhere. So again, some people, if you go to the gym, some people may put gym under regularly scheduled, some people may put it under personal time. If you have important time where you just sit and read, that's not reading about school, then that would be personal time. If you have time to meditate, if you have time that you just need downtime to not just to gel out and not do anything. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, anybody else think of the category again? We're not looking at school yet. Does anybody think of the category that's not up there that should be up there? We're not doing study nor school yet. Everything but school. Yeah. What? Socializing? Yeah? No? Or I'm going to give you another category. If you have something else that you do that you know you're going to do that you don't think is already taken up by some of these categories, then I want you to count that in for the week.
What about like a vacation?
What?
What about like vacations or something?
So this is just a typical week?
Okay.
Yeah. So, but we're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about that later. Looking at what a typical week looks like for you. So now I want you to put in time that you are in class, just in class, not time to study. Oh, and by the way, like this class, or if you have a fully online class, you are supposed to have what's called contact hours, which means you're supposed to be spending as much time online with that class as you would be as if you were face-to-face with that class. So in other words, our class is technically a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, even though we don't meet on Friday. So you should be spending at least the time that, so at least an hour a week just online to make up for that extra hour, which even doesn't count the extra homework on top of that, if that makes any sense. So allot that in on class time. So in other words, class time for this week would be 3 hours a week, not 2 hours a week. But again, this is just time in class. Okay, does anybody think of anything that should be up there that's not up there? What I want you to do is I want you to count up the hours. Whatever number you got from 168. Subtract whatever number you got from 168. Knowing, again, that we have not put in study time. Okay, so now everybody pay attention for a second, because this is where everybody's going to find out different things. Some of you are negative numbers. And again, we haven't put in study time yet. Some of you have a lot more time. So 168 is hours in a week. 168 is the hours that you are given in a week. More scheduled than there are hours. And if you're crazy thinking, gosh, you're so busy all the time, probably something needs to give. If you have a whole lot of hours left over and you're thinking that, wow, I've just never have the time, maybe it's more about organization. So again, everybody is different, and this is why we do it this way, because everybody is different. And we haven't even begun to put in study time. So now what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you the recommendation of the counseling department about how much time you should spend studying, knowing that if you're already negative, that's something to think about, especially if you're already negative and you're struggling in some of your classes. So what I want you to do is I want you to write a list of your classes. Just write a list of the classes that you're taking right now. Now what I want you to do is next to each class, each place where you wrote down a class, I want you to assign a number to that class. Now let me tell you the criteria for the number. And they're not, the numbers aren't in relationship to another words. In other words, I'm going to ask you to rate them 1 through 3, and I'll tell you what the rating is for in a minute. But they're not necessarily in relationship to another. So in other words, you could have all 3s or you could have all 1s. They're not in comparison to each other, but you need to rate each class. How you're going to rate each class is the hours of number, the amount of time that it takes to do well in that class. So you're judging easy is a 1, medium is a 2, hard is a 3, and easy, medium, and hard is defined by how much time it takes to do well in that class. So it may be a fairly easier class, but it takes a whole lot of time because you have a lot of work to do. Or it may be a really, really hard class that doesn't necessarily have all those, doesn't have so many requirements, but it takes a lot of time because it takes a lot of time to study. Okay, so 1, 2, or 3, and again, you can have all 1s, you can have all 3s, they're not in relationship to each other. But I want you to assign a 1, 2, or 3, naming if that class is easy, medium, or hard. And easy, medium, and hard is defined by how much time it takes to do well in that class. So assign every class a number. Now, I'm going to tell you what the recommendation for the counseling department is. Anybody in aerospace in here? I used to think that these numbers were kind of like exaggerated until I saw how much time my son spends on aerospace. So then I thought, wow, they're kind of maybe underestimated for some majors. So according to the counseling department, for every easy class, you should be spending at least 1 hour outside of class per hour inside of class. Class, because again, part of our class is online, so our class is really a 3-hour per week class. And so for the counseling department, they say that you should be spending, even if you're labeling it as an easy class, you should be spending at least 3 hours outside of class. At least 3 hours outside of class for every easy class. So I just want you to count up these numbers. Okay? The counseling department recommends, again, for a medium class, that you spend 2 hours outside of class per hour inside of class. So if you have a medium class that meets for 3 hours a week, you should be spending 6 hours outside of class just on that class. And again, Now, if you have, for all the hard classes you have, the recommendation of the counseling department is that you spend 3 hours outside of class per every hour inside a class. Okay, so you got a hard class that meets 3 hours a week. The recommendation is you should be spending 9 hours a week just on that class studying. So what I want you to do is I want you to just count up the numbers. Say you got, and you got numbers assigned. I want you to tell me how much the counseling department recommends. And give me a total. And again, this is no judgment, this is no right and wrong. I just want you to kind of look at what's going on with your time. And you know, another thing to look at here is if you are struggling with your grades, are you really spending the time that is recommended that you spend on those classes? So now I want you to look at this total number and look at this total number and just compare the two. Because again, now you should, I'm not going to have you do this, but to be thinking if you really have the time, and we haven't even put in like to-do lists or extra things that you do, right? But this is the time that you should be studying. This is the time that you have left in the week. Are you, and again, this is right now, I'm just kind of giving you food for thought. Because what I'm going to ask you to do at this point, we're going to finish this on Wednesday, but what I'm going to ask you to do at this point is I want you to start kind of reflecting on what does your time look like? Are you really overscheduled? I want you to start reflecting on what you're learning from this exercise, because again, everybody's going to be different. So, the reason why we did that is because I wanted to give you some kind of accurate count of what your typical week looks like. And then throughout your typical week, how much time you're really allotting to other things like studying. So doing that once was sufficient. Sometimes people think that for their final option they got to go through and count up every hour that they spent sleeping, and it's not a what I did. A time management plan is a plan for the future. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be planning up until, from today up until, and better yet if you could go back and start on Monday retroactively, but that's okay if you can't, up until your last final. And again, because it's planning, even if your last final is after we meet in here and after you're turning it in, it's okay because you're planning. It's not a record of what you did. Does that make sense so far? So as we go through today, I'm going to try to tell you what I'm requiring different that's over and above for the final option. But again, everybody turns it as a journal, even if you're doing it as the final. And even if it's repeating some of that stuff, that's okay. It just goes in a different place in Blackboard, and it's easier if you submit it both as a journal and as a final. If you are doing it only as a journal, what I need for you to do is I want you to submit those lists that we did on Monday. We're also going to do another list today. And again, the lists aren't that important. I just want to see that you did go through that process. If you were not in class on Monday, there will be a posted video because I want you to go through that process, and I just want to see that you went through it. And then you will also be submitting the weekly planner, and I'm going to tell you today how I want you to do it. Because again, when people do time management, most of the time they sit down with an empty calendar and feel like they got all the time in the world. You're going to schedule all the rest of your life in first, all the things that we counted up hours for. And this is where I highly suggest that you do it with a pencil. Because at some point you're probably going to find out that you have to erase and move things. And just the external kind of act of doing that helps you realize that you might need to do that in your real life too. So you're going to be turning in the lists, you're going to be turning in the weekly planner, and you're also going to be turning in a little bit of a reflection on it. The reflection is going to be what you learned through the process. It's also going to be what you learned by following the weekly planner. And I'm going to tell you exactly again how I want you to do that. Any questions so far? So now what I want you to do is I want you to get out another piece of paper and I want you to write down a list of your classes again. I know we did this, but this is a different purpose. So now what I want you to do is I want you to write a list of classes, and with each class, I'm going to give you a little time to do this. With each class, what I want you to do is I want you to write what is due, not for the whole semester, but what is due for that class from this point out, and how much time you think it's going to take to do well on that thing. So, in other words, you might write biology. I have a paper due, I have a final. I want you to tell me how many hours it's going to take to write that paper. And I mean really write it, not just do the writing part, but get it typed up and get it ready to submit. So the total number of hours that it's going to take to do well on that piece of paper, on that paper. You might also have a final. I want you to tell me how many hours that you think it's going to take you to study to do well. It's not just the hours taking the final. I want to know how many hours that you think that it will take for you to study to do well on that final. So list the class, list everything that's due from now until the moment you walk out of that class for the last time, or the moment that you finish all your required components of that class, and the hours that you think that it's going to take to do well to finish them. So go ahead, because we're going to do something with this, so you need to write it now. Okay, find a stopping spot. If you need to, you can go back to it in a little bit, but we need to go on. So now what I want you to do is have your weekly planner out. Now, if you're doing this as a final, then you need to be starting today, or maybe last Monday, but at least starting today. Doing this as a journal, and again, everybody, if you're doing the final, you do both. But for the journal, what I want you to do right now is to commit to 1 week that you want this to be for. So it might start today and go to next Wednesday. You might feel that it's more beneficial to start next Monday and go through the whole week. It's totally up to you. I don't care. From this point out, I want this to really be what you need it to be for the next couple of weeks. So for the journal, I want you to pick the time frame, 1 full week, that's going to be most beneficial for you to get you really ready for finals week and what's beyond. So right now, pick in your brain what days you want it to start on and what days you're going to have it end on. And now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write, because what we did on Monday was I asked you to write a bunch of random stuff that you typically do every week. Eating, grooming, travel time, going to class, going to work. What I want you to do now is I want you to write a specific to-do list for that week. So on this list, it's going to be more very specific things to that week, not necessarily I'm going to get up and I'm going to groom and I'm going to travel in my car appointment, or if you have a hair appointment, or if you're graduating and you have to get stuff ready for graduation, or if you're whatever you need to do, you have a special class or a group meeting because you're working on a group project, or you have a meeting for a club or anything like that that's specific to this week. I want you to write a to-do list for that week. So go ahead and do that right now. So now I want you to, so instead of thinking generic, so you've defined in your mind what week you want it to be. Now I want you to specifically be thinking about that week. So while you're finishing that, I know a lot of people are still working on that. What I want you to do now is I'm going to give you really specific instructions. And again, if you have a pencil, I would highly recommend you do this with a pencil. Because what I want you to do is we're going to start scheduling in your week, but we're going to do the reverse scheduling. Again, meaning that at some point you may need to erase and move things, which is just the act of doing that is a really good kind of cement in your brain. In other words, if you're writing down everything that we did in the reverse order that we did it, in other words, you're going to schedule in your sleep, you're going to schedule in your grooming, you're going to schedule in your travel time, you're going to schedule all that stuff in first, and you have like, okay, I'm like watching Game of Thrones at 6 o'clock on Sunday night, and oh my gosh, I actually have a paper due the next day. Maybe I need to tape it instead of watching it, which may be a big deal, but so you got to have that a little eraser, a different eraser to be able to move things. Maybe that's a horrible example, but everything, don't take Game of Thrones. But you know what I mean is what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to start moving things around that works with your new schedule. And again, we're going from the simplest stuff first. So what I want you to do is I want you to take that very first list that we did, put it up to all the hours in the week. We started with sleep, we went to grooming, eating, travel time, and I want you to schedule all those hours in that order. So I actually want you to schedule your sleep in. And then I want you to schedule how many hours you said it was going to take to get your grooming done, and what schedule in your travel time. I want you to schedule all that stuff in the order that I gave it to you. Again, I want this to be for you, so I want you to do it at this point of what's best for you, but I want you to do it in the specific procedure because, again, we kind of see how I started this whole conversation with you don't manage time. You manage yourself within the time. And so right now, the whole process that we're going to kind of cements in your brain that you do have to manage yourself with the time. And you have these things that take up your time. How do you have to change them up and move them around to make time for the other things that might be more important for the So what we're going to do, and again, I'm specifically doing it in this order for a purpose. What I want you to do is just schedule all the stuff that we added up, just kind of the routine stuff. Then we're going to go to the list of how many hours it's going to take to get those specific things done that you said you need specifically for each of those classes. I want to see those scheduled in. Now, remember, I don't have to see every hour scheduled in because this is 1 week and you've got, what, 2.5 weeks until your last final, or I don't know when your last final is going to be, but you know, so I want you to judge how much time you can get done theoretically in that 1 week. If you are doing this also as your final, I want to see all those hours scheduled in. You have a list of classes, you have all these hours that you say, and I want to see them specifically scheduled in. In other words, if you tell me it's going to take 5 hours to study for your biology final, on the weekly planner or on the planner for the 3 weeks or whatever, how much you have until your last final, I don't want to see just study. I want to see I'm studying for my biology final, and I want to see those 5 hours that you told me that it was going to take. Does that make sense? So first thing I want you to do is I want you to just schedule in all the random stuff that we counted up. From there, I want you to schedule in all the hours that you told me that it was going to take to do well in whatever is due from now until the end of the semester in all of your classes. And again, if you're only doing this as a journal, I don't have to see all the hours, but I have to see a significant amount. I should probably see at least half of those hours scheduled in. Maybe between a third and a half, but significant amount of those hours scheduled in. And then from there, I want you to go to the to-do list, right? So you're just doing all the generic stuff, then you're going to do the class list, then you're going to do the to-do list. And so again, this is at the point where you may need to start really moving stuff, erasing stuff, kind of, it's like a puzzle, putting it all together, because you're managing yourself within your time, not managing time. Was for you got to figure out, because you're only given so many hours. I mean, that's the reality, right? We don't manage time, we manage ourselves within time. We're only given 24 hours. That's why I have you do this in a pencil. Sometimes something's going to have to give.
When you say grooming, do you literally mean like grooming, like shaving?
Yes. Because that honestly is a very honest question. But you're only given the hours you're given. And that's honestly why I have us do it this way. Yeah. Just make a half-hour slot. Yes. Absolutely. So the question is it okay if we color code it? Absolutely. You guys, if you're doing this, especially if you're doing this for your final, you can get as creative as you want. I have people color code. I have people do like little, you know, what do you call it on a map? Like a key code. Yeah. You guys, if you also want to, not just for the final, but if you want to turn this in as a printed out spreadsheet for the weekly planner, you can absolutely do that. It may be easier for you to do it and turn it in that way. Because again, my goal, and this is why I do it at this point in the quarter, I want this to really be as beneficial and as helpful to you as it can be for this last period of time. Yeah. Okay, so now what I want you to do, first of all, you don't have to do it on the weekly planner if you don't want to. I just write that up so people have some kind of idea of what I want. If you want to make your own spreadsheet, even if you're only just doing it as a journal, that's fine. If you want to make your spreadsheet for a week and turn that in as your journal and make it for 3 weeks and turn that in as your final, then that's fine too. But let me give you a couple other things that I want you to be able to do with this. First of all, how you decide your hours is totally up to you. For some people, full hour increments don't work and they want to do half hours. That's totally fine. Again, I want this to work for you. I just kind of made up a generic one for that weekly planner. You do not need to use that weekly planner. And if you're doing it as a final, I don't want you to. So what I want you to do is, the other thing that happens often is we may have all these great plans and life happens. Somebody just asked me, you know, can we color code it? And I had a student once that had just the most, she did this as her final project, and she totally got into it. She had everything color coded, and she had like these keys to the, I mean, it was just like beautiful. And the first morning, her car broke down. She was really dependent on her car. That was a whole window. So what I want you to do now is think about plan B. Plan B is basically, if everything goes wrong, what are the 3 most important, and I'm just using the word 3, the term 3, it could be 4, it could be 1. What are the most important things I need to remember for today? So down here, below all the times, I want you to write, you know, to do. Most important to do, which is kind of different. And so that would be, I don't want everything repeated up here. Like most important to do, I don't want, I'm going to sleep, I'm going to groom. I don't want that. What I want is you will go through your day, and if all else fails, what do you need to remember? You know, just what are the 3 most important things? If I do this, I'm okay. Okay? If your car breaks down the very first morning, what are the 3 things that you just need to focus on getting done? And then the other one, so I want 2 more categories down here. In the last category, I want you to put adjustments. Put how'd it go? And then adjustments. So now down here, I just want you to put a few notes. How did that day go? Did you get everything done? Did you not? What adjustments did you have to make? Because this should be an interactive thing. In other words, if I have all these things I had to do, and oh my gosh, something came up, I didn't get everything done, I'm going to have to make an adjustment. And there's some things that I'm going to have to add to Monday. So every day I want you to reflect on how'd it go? What are the adjustments I need to make? Some days it might be fine, I got everything done. Some days it might be, wow, I got things done and something I was supposed to do tomorrow. So that adjustment is I don't have to do it tomorrow. But this is probably right here the most important category. How'd it go? What adjustments? It's an interactive device. So as you go through that week, I want you to be interacting with it and how it went every day and what are the adjustments that you need to make. Okay, so and then this 2 to 3 paragraphs reflection is an overall reflection. So in the overall reflection, I want what did you learn about your time? Some of you probably learned that you are way more scheduled than hours in a day. Some of you may learn that you have way more hours that you thought you did. You're just not organized very good. So I want you to kind of reflect on generically what you learned, and then also what you learned by reflecting on every day. So this is a daily reflection, just in bullet points, which goes into the paragraph reflection.